Long before the shadows of betrayal and the flames of war would mark the galaxy, there existed an age of quiet determination, a time when humanity stretched its gaze to the stars with unshakable confidence. The Emperor, a figure of immense wisdom and foresight, guided humanity not with tyranny, but with the patience of one who understood the vastness of the universe and the fragility of mortal ambition. His presence was felt across countless worlds, a subtle resonance that inspired loyalty, courage, and a shared purpose among those who had long been divided. In these early years of the Great Crusade, humanity had begun to emerge from the fractured remnants of its own past. Thousands of worlds, once isolated and unaware of one another, were brought into the fold of the Imperium, united under a vision that transcended local loyalties and planetary squabbles. Each planet, with its own customs, languages, and histories, came to understand that it was part of something far greater. The Emperor's authority, though distant, was absolute in its influence, guiding governors and commanders with clarity of purpose that seemed almost prophetic. The crusading fleets moved like rivers of light through the void, their paths deliberate and measured, each strike against ignorance and isolation carried out with careful precision. The Imperium was not yet a fortress of paranoia, nor was it a galaxy shrouded in fear. It was, instead, a network of hope, of potential realized and possibilities yet to be fulfilled. Humanity, though scattered, believed in itself, and in the promise that one day every star would shine under the same banner. Among the many warriors of this time, there were those whose names would become legendary, though not yet spoken aloud in the quiet halls of the Emperor's command. They moved with discipline and purpose, each action a testament to the vision of unity that inspired the Imperium. Though the galaxy was vast and often indifferent, there was a sense of inevitability to the Crusade's progress. Worlds that had known only division now stood ready to embrace a common destiny, and men and women alike felt a pride in their role within a story much larger than themselves. Yet, even in this age of apparent serenity, there existed subtle ripples, hints of challenges that might one day test the very foundation of the Emperor's Welk. These were not disasters, nor yet betrayals, but quiet suggestions that the universe would not always bend to human will. Occasionally, a planet would resist integration, not out of malice, but from fear or misunderstanding. Some leaders, accustomed to ruling as gods unto themselves, balked at the idea of yielding even a fraction of their authority, and in these small, isolated defiance, the seeds of complexity were sown, seeds that, in time, would grow into storms of conflict. But in this earliest chapter of the Crusade, such considerations were distant shadows. The focus was on expansion, on the measured and careful reclamation of human worlds, and on the establishment of bonds that would endure across light years of space. Every fleet that departed from the imperial shipyards carried with it not only soldiers and supplies, but also the weight of expectation, the silent hope that humanity might yet overcome its own divisions and claim a place among the stars as a single, unified civilization. The Emperor's vision was both immense and intimate. While he surveyed the galaxy as one might consider a chessboard, he also understood the lives of individual men and women, the quiet courage of those who built civilizations, who taught children, who navigated the dangers of alien environments and hostile climates. It was this understanding that allowed the Crusade to flourish. The Imperium was not simply an empire of force. It was a carefully constructed network of guidance and protection, of oversight and inspiration. Each world brought into its embrace became part of a tapestry that promised strength, resilience, and, above all, continuity. In this time, the Carcharodons, a nascent and mysterious chapter of humanity's defenders, moved unseen along the edges of the Crusade's path. Their origins were obscure even to those who chronicle the expanding Imperium, and their presence was marked by swift, decisive action when worlds teetered on the brink of chaos. Though not yet fully understood, they embodied the quiet discipline and relentless vigilance that would later define them. In many ways, they were a reflection of the Emperor's will, steadfast, unyielding, and dedicated to the preservation of humanity across a galaxy full of uncertainty. And so, the Great Crusade unfolded with a deliberate serenity, each world brought into unity with care and precision, each action measured against the long-term vision of a single, unbroken Imperium. The galaxy, though immense and often indifferent, began to feel the gentle imprint of human resolve. In these early years, there was a sense that nothing was impossible, that even the most distant and isolated stars could be touched by the guiding hand of the Emperor. As night falls upon a sleeping world, one can imagine the quiet stars of the Imperium, each a beacon of hope and determination. The fleets continue their slow, methodical journey through the void, carrying with them the promise of unity and the assurance of purpose. The galaxy is vast, its future uncertain, yet in these moments there exists a calm, a certainty born not of domination, but of vision. And it is in this vision, in this gentle and deliberate progress, that humanity begins to write the first lines of a history that will one day become legend. And as the void stretches endlessly beyond the reach of any single light, the story pauses, leaving the galaxy in a moment of quiet reflection. Here, in the silence between stars, one can almost hear the whisper of beginnings, the faint echo of hope carried on the winds of time, inviting the listener to rest, to contemplate, and to await the continuation of a tale yet unfolding. As the Great Crusade pressed onward, humanity's reach extended into regions of space both distant and uncharted. Worlds that had slept in isolation for millennia were drawn into the fold of the Imperium, and with each new planet came the delicate work of integration. The Emperor's vision, vast and far-reaching, was mirrored in the fleets that moved steadily across the stars, bringing order and guidance where once there had been only fragmentation. Yet, at the periphery of these campaigns, in the quiet and often unremarked corners of the galaxy, forces moved whose purpose was subtle but no less vital. Among these quiet guardians were the early Carcharodons, a chapter of warriors whose origins were as shadowed as a void they patrolled. Unlike the more prominent legions whose deeds were chronicled in records and celebrated in histories, the Carcharodons operated largely unseen, their interventions precise, measured, and final. Where worlds floundered in unrest or where isolation bred despair, they appeared not as conquerors, but as custodians of stability. Their presence, though infrequently acknowledged, ensured that the Empire's expansion remained deliberate and sustainable, and that the Emperor's far-reaching plans were not derailed by disorder or neglect. These warriors were distinguished by a singular discipline, honed to a point where hesitation was almost impossible. Every movement, every decision, was informed by a deep understanding of human nature and the strategic necessities of survival. In this era, before the upheavals that would later rend the galaxy apart, such precision was both a gift and a necessity. It was through these silent, careful interventions that the Imperium could continue its expansion without fracturing, even as new worlds brought with them unfamiliar challenges and unpredictable behaviors. The fleets of the Crusade, magnificent in their scale and coordination, were accompanied by vast networks of advisors, governors, and scholars. Yet even among these trained and dedicated servants of the Emperor, there were limits to comprehension. Entire cultures, with traditions spanning thousands of years, could not be fully understood in a single generation. Here, the Carcharodons' presence became essential. They moved with an instinctive awareness of danger and need, intervening at moments when diplomacy might falter and conventional force might be excessive. Their actions were precise, surgical, and often irreversible, leaving worlds intact but forever changed by their quiet authority. It was a time when humanity's confidence in its destiny was nearly absolute. Every victory, every world brought into unity, reinforced a growing belief that the Imperium's purpose was righteous and inevitable. Yet beneath this prevailing assurance, there were subtle currents of caution, hints that the vastness of space might conceal difficulties not yet imagined. Even as fleets brought order to newly discovered systems, the Emperor's distant gaze remained vigilant, perceiving the complexity of human ambition and the fragility of mortal resolve. And though these concerns were not yet pressing, the early Carcharodons seemed attuned to them, their presence a quiet acknowledgment that vigilance must accompany expansion. The Emperor himself, though seldom seen directly, inspired a sense of certainty and calm among those who acted in his name. Commanders, soldiers, and administrators alike drew confidence from the knowledge that a greater purpose guided their actions. The Crusade was not merely a military endeavor, it was a project of civilization, of bringing isolated humanity together under a framework of guidance, protection, and shared destiny. Every fleet that left the system carried more than men and material. It carried hope, instruction, and the implicit expectation that those worlds would contribute to the larger tapestry of human progress. Within this framework, the Carcharodons operated at the intersection of order and subtle menace. They were neither ceremonial nor symbolic. They were enforcers of continuity, ensuring that humanity's expansion did not falter under the weight of its own ambition. Their methods were quiet but unyielding, their movement precise, and their understanding of both warfare and diplomacy unusually deep. Where other forces might rely on overwhelming strength, the Carcharodons relied on anticipation, preparation, and an intimate knowledge of the human condition. It was this combination of skill and foresight that allowed the Imperium to grow with a rare stability, even as it absorbed worlds long accustomed to autonomy and local rule. As the Crusade unfolded, the early interactions of these warriors with newly integrated worlds became the foundation of a reputation both respected and feared. Though their deeds were rarely recorded in detail, the impressions they left were indelible. Communities that might otherwise have descended into conflict or despair found guidance, resolution, and, in some cases, an unspoken lesson in discipline. The galaxy, immense and indifferent, seemed to respond to these quiet interventions, allowing the human expansion to proceed with remarkable efficiency and minimal collapse. In these early years, the sense of unity and purpose was nearly absolute, and the Emperor's distant authority provided a stabilizing presence across countless light years. Yet the Carcharodons' shadowed vigilance was a reminder that even in the most serene moments, the galaxy remained vast, unpredictable, and often perilous. Their quiet actions hinted at the complexity of the challenges that lay ahead, even as humanity celebrated its progress and believed in the inevitability of its destiny. And so, as the fleets of the Great Crusade glided through the void, leaving worlds forever changed in their wake, the Carcharodons continued their silent watch. They moved without fanfare, their presence often noted only after the fact, yet their impact resonated through the corridors of governance, the streets of cities, and the hearts of those who witnessed them. In the calm of space, under the gentle glow of distant stars, they embodied the Emperor's vision, a balance of guidance, vigilance, and unshakable resolve. The galaxy, expansive and patient, observed without comment. The Crusade's slow and deliberate progress carried both promise and a quiet tension, the sort that accompanies any venture into the unknown. In the shadows of these early years, the Carcharodons remained a constant, a steady force of discipline and purpose, ensuring that humanity's light would not falter even in the most isolated reaches of the void. And as the stars shimmered in distant systems, and fleets traversed the vast emptiness of space with careful precision, one could feel the quiet rhythm of the Imperium's growth. It was a time of hope, vigilance, and measured confidence. And in this quiet, measured progress, there existed a sense of anticipation, soft, subtle, and almost imperceptible, a promise of the story of humanity, of the Imperium, and of those who silently guarded its future, would continue to unfold across the stars. The Great Crusade advanced steadily through the void, and with each passing system, the Imperium's dominion grew in both breadth and depth. Entire civilizations, long isolated by distance and circumstance, were drawn into a single framework, their histories and cultures folded carefully into a vision of unity. Yet for all the grandeur of the fleets, the intricate administration of worlds, and the careful planning that guided each campaign, there remained aspects of the galaxy that resisted simple comprehension. The stars were vast, and even the most meticulously charted regions held secrets unknown to human eyes. It was in these reaches, far from the thriving hubs of imperial authority, that the Carcharodons operated most effectively. These warriors moved with a measured purpose, blending observation with decisive action. They were not tasked with conquest for its own sake, nor were they heralded as a face of the Emperor's will. Instead, they served as quiet enforcers of stability, addressing threats that might otherwise go unnoticed until they had grown beyond control. Entire systems could be destabilized by internal strife, rogue governors, or local militias who clung to old customs and practices. In such cases, the intervention of the Carcharodons was swift and exacting, executed with a precision that left little room for error. To those who witnessed them, these guardians were enigmatic and, at times, intimidating, but always necessary. The balance they maintained was delicate. Worlds could not be assimilated by force alone, and excessive aggression risked undoing the careful work of the Crusade. The Carcharodons, therefore, relied on observation, understanding, and timing, often remaining in shadow until their intervention was unavoidable. It was said that they appeared where chaos threatened to overwhelm the potential of human civilization, striking not to dominate, but to preserve. Their methods were disciplined and consistent, rooted in a deep understanding of both strategy and human psychology. In every movement, every calculated strike, there was the echo of the Emperor's distant guidance, a reflection of the vision that had inspired the unification of countless worlds. During these early years, the Imperium's confidence in its own destiny was nearly absolute. Governors and planetary leaders believed in the inevitability of their integration into a greater framework, and the soldiers of the Crusade carried a sense of righteous purpose. Yet beneath this growing certainty, the galaxy's enormity introduced subtle challenges that could not be fully anticipated. Even the most careful plans were susceptible to the unpredictability of distant systems, where the absence of imperial oversight allowed local conditions to evolve in unforeseen ways. In such circumstances, the presence of the Carcharodons served as a stabilizing influence, mitigating risks before they could escalate into crises. The Emperor's distant authority shaped much of this stability. His vision extended across light years, yet he governed not by micromanagement, but through guidance that inspired loyalty, discipline, and initiative in those who acted in his name. Commanders of fleets, administrators of newly integrated planets, and leaders of entire legions operated with a degree of autonomy, but always with the understanding that their actions contributed to a larger, deliberate purpose. The Carcharodons embodied this principle most fully. Operating independently, they were simultaneously agents of oversight and guardians of continuity, ensuring that even in the most remote regions, the Crusade's objectives were preserved. As the human presence expanded, the Crusade often encountered worlds whose populations had endured millennia of isolation. Their societies were diverse, their traditions deeply rooted, and their responses to the Imperium's arrival varied widely. Some welcomed the promise of connection and protection, while others resisted, fearful of the unknown and reluctant to surrender familiar ways of life. It was in these encounters that the Carcharodon skills were most vital. They could diffuse tension through strategic presence, assert authority through disciplined action, or simply observe until a precise moment when intervention would yield the greatest effect. In all cases, the results were decisive, leaving worlds incorporated into the Imperium without unnecessary disruption, yet forever aware of the quiet vigilance that watched over them. Even among the legions known for their heroism and strength, the Carcharodons were distinct. Their reputation was less about grandeur or spectacle and more about consistency, effectiveness, and subtle influence. They rarely sought recognition, and their deeds often went unrecorded in the chronicles of the Crusade. Yet their impact was felt across countless systems, a stabilizing thread woven through the fabric of humanity's expansion. Where others relied on force, they relied on presence and precision. Where others were visible and celebrated, there were shadows, operating unseen but always aligned with the Emperor's will. The galaxy, in its vastness, remained indifferent, yet it seemed to respond to the discipline and order the Crusade imposed. Systems that might have descended into isolation or conflict found themselves guided by structures of governance and oversight, reinforced quietly by the actions of the Carcharodons. Even as fleets advanced to distant stars, leaving trails of light across the void, these warriors maintained a delicate balance that allowed humanity to grow without fragmenting. It was a slow, methodical process, one that required patience, foresight, and profound understanding of human nature. And so, the Carcharodons continued their watch, moving through the void with a quiet authority. Their presence was at once subtle and unavoidable, a reassurance to some, a warning to others, and always a reminder that the Emperor's vision extended beyond the immediate and the obvious. In this early era of the Great Crusade, before the fractures of rebellion and the turmoil of heresy, they exemplified the principles of vigilance, restraint, and unwavering commitment to unity. As the stars stretched endlessly in every direction, and the fleets of the Crusade carried humanity to new worlds, the quiet guardians remained vigilant. They were a steady presence in a galaxy of infinite possibilities, guiding, protecting, and shaping the unfolding story of the Imperium. In the calm of the void, their actions spoke to the balance between ambition and caution, between expansion and preservation, leaving the listener with a sense of serenity, purpose, and anticipation for the chapters yet to unfold. As the Great Crusade moved deeper into uncharted space, the challenges faced by the Imperium became increasingly complex. Many of the newly discovered worlds had histories and cultures shaped by isolation, environments hostile to human habitation, or long-forgotten conflict that left scars upon their societies. The fleets that carried humanity's expansion were vast and meticulously organized, yet the distant regions of the galaxy presented obstacles that required subtlety and foresight, rather than sheer force alone. It was here, at the edges of the known and the unknown, that the Carcharodons' role became ever more critical. Unlike other legions whose deeds were celebrated in chronicles and records, the Carcharodons operated largely in shadow. Their missions were precise and their movements deliberate, always aligned with the broader objectives of the Emperor, yet rarely visible to those outside the immediate sphere of action. They were the guardians of continuity, ensuring that the integration of isolated worlds proceeded without disruption and that the vision of a unified humanity remained intact. Their interventions were measured, neither indulgent nor cruel, but always effective, maintaining stability where disorder might have otherwise flourished. On many planets, local conflict had persisted for centuries, often hidden beneath the surface of everyday life. Minor disputes between neighboring cities, long-standing rivalries between clans, or the lingering effects of natural catastrophes could easily destabilize a system if left unchecked. When conventional diplomacy failed, and when the presence of the Crusade's regular forces was either impractical or insufficient, the Carcharodons were deployed. Their actions were swift and purposeful, designed to restore equilibrium without unnecessary violence, ensuring that the delicate processes of assimilation and governance could continue. Their approach relied not merely on military skill, but on observation, intuition, and an understanding of human behavior. They moved silently across worlds, assessing situations, identifying points of tension, and intervening only where their presence would produce the greatest effect. Every action was deliberate, every decision weighed against both immediate necessity and long-term consequence. In this way, the Carcharodons became instruments of the Emperor's vision, extending his authority not through overt display, but through disciplined execution and careful stewardship. While the Imperium expanded, so too did its administrative complexity. Governors, advisors, and scholars attempted to impose order on new worlds, yet the enormity of space meant that oversight could never be absolute. In these circumstances, the Carcharodons acted as stabilizing agents, filling gaps that might otherwise have been exploited by unrest or negligence. Their presence reassured those who sought guidance, warned those who contemplated defiance, and maintained a balance that allowed human civilization to grow without succumbing to its own unpredictability. The fleets themselves were impressive in scale, moving like rivers of light through the dark expanse of space. Soldiers, engineers, and administrators carried with them the tools of civilization, knowledge, technology, and the promise of protection. Yet even among these forces, the Carcharodons remained distinct. They did not seek honor or recognition, nor did they rely on spectacle to assert their authority. Instead, they were shadows of vigilance, appearing only when needed, leaving a legacy that will be felt far more than it would ever be seen. Their discipline was absolute, their loyalty unwavering, and their understanding of the Emperor's vision profound. In this era, humanity's confidence in its destiny was at its height. The integration of thousands of worlds seemed inevitable, and the Crusade advance were measured in deliberate rhythm. Yet the galaxy was vast and often indifferent, and the potential for chaos remained ever-present. It was precisely this awareness, this recognition of the fragility of human ambition, that shaped the Carcharodons' interventions. They were guardians not only of order, but of possibility, ensuring that each new world contributed to the larger framework of the Imperium without imperiling the balance that allowed such expansion to succeed. On the edges of star systems, where communication with the central command was slow or unreliable, the Carcharodons' independence became critical. They assessed threats with remarkable accuracy, deciding when to act and when to observe. Worlds that might have collapsed into internecine conflict found themselves guided toward cohesion, often without ever realizing the subtle influence that had shaped their fate. The quiet authority of these warriors ensured that the Crusade's progress remained uninterrupted, even in regions where the Emperor's reach was limited by distance and the constraints of time. In their movements, there was a rhythm both deliberate and graceful. Patrols across barren moons, silent landings on bustling cities, and rapid deployments to systems in turmoil all demonstrated an almost preternatural understanding of balance. The Carcharodons' interventions were rarely celebrated, yet their effects resonated across entire sectors, producing stability that would endure long after their departure. They were custodians of the Emperor's vision, vigilant and steadfast, operating in a galaxy where patience, precision, and foresight were as essential as strength and courage. And so, as the Great Crusade continued, the Carcharodons remained at the periphery, silent and unyielding. Their actions ensured that the expansion of humanity proceeded with care, that each world was carefully integrated, and that the larger vision of a unified imperium remained intact. In the quiet expanse of space, under the distant glow of innumerable stars, their presence was a reminder that vigilance must accompany ambition, that stability must temper growth, and that the true guardians of the galaxy often operate unseen. The fleets glided onward, leaving trails of light across the void, carrying humanity to new worlds and new possibilities. The Carcharodons moved among them, shadows within the light, ensuring that the story of the Imperium unfolded with deliberate serenity. And as the stars reflected their silent passage, the galaxy seemed to pause for a moment, holding its breath, offering a quiet promise of the tale of humanity's rise, and the guardians who watched over it was far from complete. As the Great Crusade pressed onward, the galaxy revealed more of its hidden complexities. Among the countless stars and the endless expanse of darkness, countless civilizations existed in isolation, some thriving quietly, others teetering on the brink of collapse. The Imperium's fleets, vast and meticulously coordinated, moved methodically from system to system, yet the true challenges often lay beyond the reach of standard command. In these moments, where uncertainty threatened to disturb the careful expansion of humanity, the Carcharodons acted with precision, embodying the Emperor's vision of order and stability in a galaxy that was neither kind nor predictable. Unlike other legions whose deeds were celebrated in chronicles or praised in the halls of command, the Carcharodons operated largely unseen. They did not seek recognition, nor did they pursue fame. Their focus was the protection of the Imperium's growth, ensuring that no world would falter because of ignorance, rebellion, or circumstance. Worlds on the fringes of known space, with histories and cultures long hidden from the larger sweep of humanity, were often the sites of their interventions. Here, subtlety was paramount, and every action was measured to preserve the delicate balance between progress and preservation. The nature of their work demanded patience and foresight. Some systems, isolated for millennia, resisted integration not from malice but from habit and tradition. Attempts to impose guidance prematurely could provoke resistance, while inaction risked disorder. The Carcharodons, attuned to such nuances, moved with a careful understanding of timing, assessing the character of each world and determining the precise moment when intervention would yield the greatest benefit. Their presence often went unnoticed, but its effect was profound, creating stability where instability had once threatened to take root. In addition to the challenges posed by human worlds, the vastness of space itself introduced unforeseen obstacles. Rogue asteroids, volatile star systems, and the occasional remnant of ancient, forgotten civilizations required vigilance and adaptability. While the main fleets maintained their carefully planned courses, the Carcharodons operated independently, responding to circumstances that standard protocols could not address. Their ability to act decisively, without waiting for orders, allowed the crusade to advance with confidence, even in regions where the Emperor's influence was distant or delayed by the incomprehensible scale of the galaxy. The soldiers of the Carcharodons were defined by their discipline and endurance. Each member understood the importance of patience, observation, and precise execution. Their actions were deliberate, never hasty, and always aligned with the broader objectives of the crusade. On worlds where tensions might escalate into open conflict, they acted as mediators of circumstance, sometimes using minimal force, other times employing swift and decisive measures to restore order. Their presence was always purposeful, and their understanding of human nature was as vital to their mission as their physical prowess. Despite their secrecy, their reputation began to spread quietly across sectors. Governors and planetary leaders who had experienced the Carcharodons' intervention spoke in hushed tones of their discipline, efficiency, and unwavering focus. Their deeds, though seldom recorded officially, became the subject of whispered stories, emphasizing not heroics or spectacle, but effectiveness and quiet authority that I end this way. The chapter became both respected and enigmatic, a symbol of the Emperor's distant but vigilant oversight, a living embodiment of the balance between power and restraint. The early years of the Great Crusade were defined by confidence and unity. Humanity's expansion was deliberate, the integration of worlds methodical, and the promise of the Imperium compelling. Yet beneath this outward stability, subtle currents of challenge and uncertainty remained. It was in addressing these quiet but persistent threats that the Carcharodons' significance became most apparent. Their interventions prevented small problems from escalating into crises, ensuring that the vast project of unifying humanity continued without compromise. They were the unseen custodians of the Emperor's vision, ensuring that expansion was not merely measured in systems gained, but in stability preserved. The Emperor himself remained a distant but unifying presence. His vision guided the crusade in a manner that transcended immediate concerns, and his understanding of both human potential and human weakness shaped the strategies employed across countless systems. The Carcharodons reflected this approach, blending vigilance, patience, and calculated action into a method of stewardship that few other forces could match. Their work was often invisible, yet it was essential, preserving the delicate equilibrium upon which the early successes of the crusade depended. In the void of space, the fleets glided steadily, carrying humanity from star to star. Systems were integrated, populations guided toward unity, and civilizations slowly transformed under the careful attention of the Imperium's administrators. Amid this progress, the Carcharodons moved quietly, like shadows against the light of distant stars. Their presence was a constant reminder that even in a galaxy seemingly under control, vigilance was necessary, and stability required more than force alone. And so, as the Great Crusade continued its methodical march, the Carcharodons maintained their silent watch. They acted as both guardians and guides, ensuring that humanity's reach remained orderly, that the Imperium's growth did not falter, and that the vision of unity endured across systems vast and complex. In the quiet moments between the passage of fleets and the distant glow of stars, their actions could be felt more than seen, shaping the future of countless worlds without ceremony or fanfare. And in that quiet, beneath the endless expanse of space, the galaxy seemed to pause, as though acknowledging the careful vigilance of these silent hunters. Their story, largely unseen, continued to unfold, a reflection of patience, discipline, and the unyielding purpose of those who safeguarded humanity's early destiny. In this calm, measured rhythm of observation, intervention, and preservation, the Imperium expanded steadily, and the tale of the Carcharodons' quiet guardianship became an enduring undercurrent within the broader sweep of the Great Crusade. The Great Crusade moved ever onward, its fleets like rivers of light carving paths through the darkness of the galaxy. Each new world brought both opportunity and uncertainty, as isolated civilizations adjusted to the arrival of humanity's expansive presence. In this vast, ever-changing tapestry, the Carcharodons operated at the margins, guardians whose work was subtle but indispensable. Their interventions were not grandiose, nor celebrated in the annals of the Imperium, yet they ensured that the crusade could proceed without collapse, that the Emperor's vision was protected, and that the delicate balance between growth and stability remained intact. In the early years, the challenge was not merely to conquer, but to understand. Many planets, though technologically capable, had societies shaped by isolation, local traditions, and generations of self-sufficiency. Some had developed unique governance systems, others adhered to long-forgotten rituals that guided daily life. The arrival of the Imperium presented both promise and peril. Missteps could provoke resistance, unrest, or even conflict. The Carcharodons, trained to perceive such subtleties, acted as intermediaries between the distant authority of the Emperor and the practical realities of these worlds. They were not administrators, nor diplomats, yet their presence allowed for measured integration that balanced oversight with autonomy. Their approach relied on observation as much as action. They would watch the patterns of society, noting where tensions simmered beneath the surface, where ambitions of leaders might diverge from the needs of their people, and where external threats could destabilize fragile systems. Only after careful assessment would they intervene, and then with precision that minimized disruption while reinforcing the principles of order and unity. Their interventions were often quiet, executed with minimal force and maximum effect, leaving worlds stabilized without the need for overt control. The fleets of the Great Crusade carried immense resources. Soldiers, engineers, scholars, and administrators, all tasked with guiding humanity's expansion. Yet the galaxy's immensity often exceeded the reach of conventional command. Systems could be days, months, or even years away from direct contact with central fleets. Here, the Carcharodons' independent operation was essential. They acted with discretion, following principles rather than orders alone, responding to circumstances with insight that combined strategic understanding with human empathy. Their autonomy allowed the Imperium to maintain coherence across the far reaches of space, even when communication was delayed or impossible. Even in the presence of other legions, the Carcharodons remained distinct. They were neither ceremonial nor flamboyant, avoiding displays of power that might draw attention or adulation. Instead, they embodied the Emperor's vision through action and restraint. Their loyalty was absolute, their discipline rigorous, and their understanding of both human nature and the galaxy's complexity profound. They moved as both watchers and arbiters, shaping the course of human expansion while remaining largely invisible to those they protected. The Imperium's expansion was not without friction. Some worlds resisted integration, clinging to traditional local authority. Others were destabilized by lingering conflicts, resource scarcity, or unpredictable environmental hazards. It was in these circumstances that the Carcharodons' quiet authority proved invaluable. They intervened when necessary, enforcing stability and preserving the conditions that allowed the crusade to progress. Their influence was subtle but far-reaching, leaving entire systems integrated and secure while maintaining the Emperor's vision of gradual, deliberate unification. As the crusade moved into uncharted sectors, the role of observation became increasingly significant. Many regions contained remnants of civilizations long forgotten, structures built by ancestors whose knowledge had been lost to time. Some worlds exhibited strange phenomena, unknown to imperial science, while others bore the marks of past conflict that threatened to resurface. The Carcharodons approached these environments with caution and precision, assessing risk before engaging, and ensuring that the Emperor's expansion did not falter due to unforeseen complexity. In every intervention, they preserved stability, guided integration, and reinforced the principle that patience and vigilance were as vital as strength in the advancement of humanity. The Carcharodons' influence extended beyond immediate crises. Their presence inspired confidence in administrators, soldiers, and civilians alike. Leaders who observed these silent guardians understood that the Emperor's reach, though distant, was supported by vigilance that spanned the void. Even without recognition, the knowledge that the Carcharodons could act when necessary instilled a sense of order and continuity. Worlds that might otherwise have drifted into unrest were kept aligned with a greater vision, their potential realized rather than wasted. In this period, the Emperor's distant authority provided a unifying principle for the galaxy, yet it was the quiet, deliberate actions of the Carcharodons that ensured practical implementation. They were the bridge between vision and reality, the stabilizing force that allowed expansion to continue without collapse. Their methods were uncelebrated, their movements almost imperceptible, but their effectiveness was absolute. They were, in every sense, guardians between stars, maintaining the fragile equilibrium upon which the crusade depended. And so, as the fleets glided silently across the darkness of space, and new worlds were incorporated into the Imperium's fold, the Carcharodons continued their quiet watch. Their presence was a reminder that the galaxy, though vast and often indifferent, could be guided with patience, precision, and unwavering vigilance. In the stillness between the stars, they acted as silent custodians of humanity's early destiny, ensuring that the story of the crusade progressed with calm deliberation and careful purpose. As distant suns shimmered across the void, and fleets carried humanity ever forward, the quiet guardians remained, their shadowed influence shaping the course of countless worlds. In that infinite silence, their story unfolded with measured serenity, a testament to vigilance, restraint, and the unyielding commitment to preserving the Emperor's vision. And in this calm, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath, offering a subtle promise that the tale of unity, growth, and silent guardianship was far from complete. The Great Crusade had reached a stage of measured expansion where order and vigilance were no longer abstract concepts, but active necessities across countless worlds. Each system incorporated into the Imperium carried its own complexities, unique governance structures, lingering conflicts, and populations unaccustomed to the authority of a distant emperor. While the primary fleets and administrators addressed broad strategy and systemic integration, there were areas where human instability and unpredictability could threaten the smooth progression of the crusade. In these remote and often overlooked regions, the Carcharodons emerged as both observers and actors, a silent hand shaping outcomes with precision and care. Their approach was methodical. Unlike other legions whose presence was marked by grandeur and spectacle, the Carcharodons operated in a deliberate, almost imperceptible manner. Their movements were calculated, their interventions measured, and their influence often unnoticed until the consequences of their work became evident. On worlds at risk of political fragmentation, they appeared quietly, ensuring that leaders understood the boundaries of their authority and the limits of autonomy within the framework of the Imperium. Where local disputes might escalate, they acted with precision that resolved tensions swiftly yet subtly, minimizing disruption while maximizing stability. Observation was as important as action. Before intervening, the Carcharodons studied the patterns of societies, the behaviors of leaders, and the underlying causes of unrest. They noted how resources were distributed, how rivalries persisted, and how populations responded to the presence of external authority. Only after careful assessment did they engage, striking in ways that would leave a minimum disturbance while reinforcing the Emperor's overarching purpose. Their discipline was absolute, their decisions informed by both logic and intuition, and their understanding of human behavior allowed them to anticipate outcomes that might elude conventional commanders. While fleets of the Crusade carried the weight of soldiers, engineers, and administrators of distant systems, the Carcharodons acted independently, often without immediate contact with central command. In this autonomy lay both responsibility and power. They navigated challenges that were too subtle or complex for mass forces, resolving conflicts that might otherwise fester into greater unrest. Rogue governors, isolated populations, and planets recovering from long periods of hardship were brought into alignment not by force alone, but by the quiet authority of these vigilant warriors. Their presence created stability, ensuring that the Imperium's expansion continued unimpeded, even in the most distant and uncharted regions. The nature of their work required a balance between restraint and decisive action. On some worlds, minimal interference was sufficient, guiding populations through suggestion, influence, or the subtle display of discipline. On others, where entrenched conflict threatened to undermine integration, swift, precise, and unhesitating action was necessary. In all cases, their operations were executed with the goal of maintaining stability while preserving the integrity of the Emperor's vision. Violence, when employed, was a tool of last resort, measured and controlled to prevent escalation. Their reputation, though understated, spread quietly across sectors. Governors, planetary leaders, and local administrators who had encountered them spoke in tones of respect, often tinged with apprehension. The Carcharodons' effectiveness was unquestioned, yet their methods were enigmatic. They were not concerned with recognition, and their deeds were seldom recorded in official chronicles. Instead, their legacy grew through the outcomes of their actions. World stabilized, conflict diffused, and the continuity of the Crusade preserved across systems that might otherwise have been lost to chaos or neglect. The Emperor's distant authority was a unifying principle, yet practical oversight was necessarily limited by the vast distances between worlds. Here, the Carcharodons' independent judgment became crucial. They acted in alignment with the vision of the Imperium, enforcing stability where needed, observing where patience was required, and intervening where the consequences of inaction would be too great. In every engagement, they reflected the balance of vigilance and restraint that characterized the early Crusade, ensuring the growth of humanity without sacrificing stability that made such expansion possible. The Great Crusade's methodical expansion relied on both broad strategy and precise intervention. The Carcharodons occupied a space between these two principles, moving unseen but shaping outcomes with a quiet authority that left entire sectors aligned with imperial objectives. Their presence was a reminder that expansion alone was not sufficient. The preservation of order and the prevention of chaos were equally essential. In a galaxy of infinite complexity, where the smallest misstep could have cascading consequences, their vigilance ensured that progress was sustainable and deliberate. Even as distant fleets glided through the void, leaving trails of light across innumerable systems, the Carcharodons maintained their shadowed watch. Their influence extended beyond immediate crises, fostering stability that would endure long after their departure. Worlds under their quiet guidance were strengthened, populations harmonized, and conflicts minimized, all contributing to the broader success of the Crusade. In this way, they became a vital, if largely invisible, pillar of the Imperium, bridging the gap between the Emperor's distant vision and the realities of a vast, unpredictable galaxy. And so, as the stars shimmered across the expanse of space and fleets moved methodically from system to system, the Carcharodons continued their silent work. They were both guardians and arbiters, moving among the shadows, shaping outcomes, and ensuring that the Imperium's growth remained steady and unbroken. In the quiet of the void, beneath the distant light of innumerable suns, their story unfolded with patience, discipline, and unwavering purpose. The galaxy, vast and indifferent, seemed to acknowledge their vigilance, holding a subtle promise that the tale of these silent watchers and the human expansion they safeguarded was far from complete. As the Great Crusade pressed further into the uncharted reaches of the galaxy, the Imperium encountered more than isolated civilizations and ungoverned worlds. Some systems bore the remnants of past conflicts, their histories etched into crumbling cities or ruined landscapes. Others presented phenomena so strange that even the most learned scholars of the Imperium could scarcely comprehend them. It was in these liminal spaces, between known and unknown, between order and chaos, that the Carcharodons exercised a unique form of guardianship. Silent and deliberate, they moved with the precision of those who understood that the survival of the Imperium depended as much on foresight as on force. Their operations were seldom publicized. They did not march under banners, nor did they leave monuments in their wake. Instead, their influence was measured in the result of careful intervention. Systems stabilized, populations guided, conflicts averted, and rebellions quelled before they could threaten wider stability. Their discipline was rigorous, their decisions informed by a combination of intelligence, observation, and intuition. Each mission was assessed for both immediate necessity and long-term consequence, ensuring that even the smallest action would reinforce the Emperor's vision rather than compromise it. The Carcharodons' presence was often subtle, yet their understanding of human nature allowed them to operate where others might fail. Leaders who misjudged their authority, communities at the brink of unrest, and planetary factions entrenched in long-standing feuds were all assessed with equal care. The Carcharodons did not impose themselves for recognition, but for effect. Their interventions were designed to stabilize rather than dominate, to preserve rather than conquer, and to guide rather than dictate. Worlds that might have fractured under the pressures of isolation or misunderstanding found themselves realigned with the principles of the Crusade, often without ever fully perceiving the hand that had shaped their fate. The fleets of the Great Crusade were impressive in both scale and organization, carrying vast numbers of soldiers, engineers, and administrators to distant systems. Yet the immensity of space and the diversity of civilizations meant that conventional oversight was insufficient to address every nuance. The Carcharodons' independence allowed them to act where fleets could not. Their movements were informed by both local observation and strategic foresight, enabling them to preempt crises and mitigate threats before they could escalate. In doing so, they ensured that the Crusade's progress remained deliberate, steady, and unimpeded by unforeseen complications. This era of expansion, though optimistic and confident, was not without subtle challenges. Some worlds resisted the Imperium's influence, clinging to their traditions, their leaders, or their own interpretations of justice and authority. Others faced environmental hazards or internal instability that made integration difficult. The Carcharodons' interventions were precise, surgical in effect, and never gratuitous. Their goal was always to maintain the stability necessary for successful assimilation, preserving the conditions under which human potential could flourish without fracturing. While the Emperor's distant guidance provided the overarching vision for the Crusade, it was the Carcharodons' practical implementation of that vision that ensured its success. Acting as both observers and agents of influence, they bridged the gap between intent and outcome, ensuring that each new world contributed meaningfully to the Imperium without jeopardizing its delicate equilibrium. Their work was largely unseen, but its consequences were profound, reinforcing the steady, methodical expansion that characterized this period of human history. The chapter's influence extended across sectors, even when their presence was invisible. Communities that had experienced their interventions found themselves stronger, more cohesive, and better prepared to navigate the challenges of integration. Leaders who might have overstepped boundaries were subtly corrected, ensuring alignment with the larger goals of the Imperium. In this way, the Carcharodons maintained stability not through spectacle or force alone, but through strategic action informed by observation, discipline, and insight. Despite their independence, the Carcharodons remained unwaveringly loyal to the Emperor's vision. They acted with patience and deliberation, exercising judgment tempered by experience and guided by the principles of unity, order, and long-term planning. Their operations were carefully calibrated, designed to sustain the Crusade while avoiding unnecessary confrontation. Where conflict was unavoidable, it was conducted with precision, minimizing collateral disruption while achieving necessary objectives. The Carcharodons' role, though largely hidden, became increasingly critical as the Crusade expanded into more distant regions. Their interventions ensured that the Emperor's vision was implemented consistently, even in areas far beyond the reach of central fleets or administrative oversight. By acting as sentinels in the void, they maintained both the stability and the cohesion of humanity's growing domain, preserving the conditions necessary for further expansion and integration. As the fleets glided silently through the stars, leaving trails of light that marked the progress of the Imperium, the Carcharodons remained vigilant, their shadowed presence a reminder of the balance between action and patience. Worlds were guided into alignment, conflict contained before they could escalate, and the foundations of the Emperor's vision reinforced in the quiet spaces between the stars. In this calm, deliberate rhythm, the galaxy itself seemed to respond, allowing the story of humanity's expansion and of those who watched over it to continue unfolding in a measured, steady manner. And so, in the vast emptiness of the void, where the light of distant suns illuminated silent worlds, the Carcharodons continued their watch. They were both guardians and arbiters, ensuring that the growth of humanity remained disciplined, deliberate, and enduring. In the quiet, reflective stretches between stars, their story unfolded, a testament to vigilance, patience, and the unyielding commitment to preserving the Imperium's purpose. The galaxy, vast and patient, seemed to acknowledge their presence, holding a subtle promise that the narrative of silent guardianship and careful expansion was far from complete. As the Great Crusade pressed further into the uncharted reaches of the galaxy, the Imperium's ambitions expanded alongside its understanding of the dangers that lay hidden among the stars. While many worlds welcomed the promise of unity and protection, others presented challenges that tested the wisdom and restraint of those tasked with their integration. It was in these border regions, far from the watchful gaze of Fleet Command, that the Carcharodons continued their quiet and deliberate work, observing and intervening where the complexities of human nature or environmental conditions threatened to undermine stability. Their reputation, though subtle, was steadily growing among those who encountered them. Leaders of newly integrated worlds spoke of the silent presence that seemed to guide their decisions, a measured authority that corrected missteps before they became crises. Soldiers of the Crusade noticed the precision with which conflicts were resolved, and scholars recorded hints of the chapter's existence in scattered accounts, often lacking context but revealing a pattern of intervention that was consistent and unyielding. The Carcharodons were not celebrated openly, yet their influence extended across sectors in ways that reinforced the Imperium cohesion without ever calling attention to itself. Observation remained central to their operations. They studied societies and their leaders, noting where ambition or fear could provoke unrest, where resources might be mismanaged, or where cultural traditions could clash with the broader goals of the Imperium. Only after careful assessment did they act, and then with a decisiveness tempered by subtlety. Their interventions were surgical, designed to resolve issues without unnecessary disruption, and to preserve the integrity of each world's integration into the growing human domain. In every action, their focus remained on long-term stability rather than immediate recognition. The fleets of the Crusade, vast and meticulously organized, carried soldiers, engineers, and administrators to distant systems. Yet even these resources could not anticipate every nuance, nor could Central Command respond quickly enough to every unexpected development. The Carcharodons' independence allowed them to operate beyond conventional oversight, applying judgment and strategy in accordance with the Emperor's vision. Where fleets could enforce compliance, the Carcharodons ensured understanding, maintaining order while minimizing potential for resentment or rebellion. Their influence was subtle but pervasive, extending the Emperor's authority into the spaces between fleets and bridging the distance between vision and execution. The nature of their interventions required balance. Some conflicts were contained through restraint, guidance, or the subtle demonstration of authority, while others required direct action to prevent escalation. In all cases, the Carcharodons relied on precise judgment, informed by observation and experience. Worlds that might have descended into prolonged unrest or internecine violence were instead brought into harmony, preserving both their potential and their alignment with the greater goals of the Crusade. Their actions were never arbitrary, and every decision reflected a careful consideration of both immediate consequences and long-term stability. The Emperor's distant presence remained a unifying principle across these distant reaches, yet the practical implementation of his vision depended on such vigilant guardians. The Carcharodons embodied this principle, operating at the intersection of autonomy and alignment. They were at once independent actors and instruments of imperial intent, ensuring that human expansion proceeded according to plan while maintaining flexibility to respond to unforeseen challenges. Their silent guidance allowed the Crusade to advance steadily and ensured that the integration of thousands of systems was both deliberate and sustainable. Across sectors, the quiet efficiency of the Carcharodons became increasingly evident. Administrators and local governors recognized the benefits of their interventions, often without fully understanding the extent of their influence. Populations that might have resisted imperial authority were guided toward cohesion, Leaders who might have pursued ambitions contrary to unity were corrected before their actions could create crises. Through these subtle and measured efforts, the chapter ensured that the foundations of the Imperium remained stable, even as the Crusade stretched ever further into the unknown. The challenges of distant worlds required more than discipline alone. Many systems carried the weight of history, scars from past conflicts, or environmental hazards that could imperil unprepared populations. In these situations, the Carcharodons' combination of foresight, observation, and decisive action became essential. They moved quietly across planets, assessing risks and implementing solutions with precision, always prioritizing the preservation of life and the maintenance of stability. Their presence allowed the Crusade's broader efforts to continue unimpeded, reinforcing the Emperor's vision without relying on overt displays of power. Even in the vast emptiness of space, where fleets moved silently between stars, the influence of the Carcharodons was constant. Their presence ensured that human expansion remained orderly, that the integration of new worlds did not falter, and that the principles of the Crusade were applied consistently. In this quiet vigilance, they were both guardians and arbiters, shaping the course of countless systems without fanfare, leaving results that endured far beyond their immediate interventions. And so, as the Great Crusade continued its deliberate progression, and fleets carried humanity into new systems and unknown regions, the Carcharodons remained vigilant, moving among the shadows of the stars. Their story, largely unseen, unfolded with measured care, reflecting patience, discipline, and the unyielding purpose of those who safeguarded humanity's early destiny. In the calm between the stars, the galaxy seemed to acknowledge their presence, holding a quiet promise that the narrative of silent guardianship, careful guidance, and disciplined vigilance was far from complete. As the Great Crusade advanced into ever more distant regions of the galaxy, the Imperium encountered not only isolated civilizations but signs of disorder that threatened to unsettle its careful expansion. Some worlds bore the remnants of ancient struggles, the scars of generations long forgotten. Others were shaped by environments hostile to human habitation, demanding careful planning and foresight before integration could succeed. It was in these situations that the Carcharodons' purpose became increasingly vital, acting as both observers and instruments of stability. Their presence silent but decisive across systems where uncertainty threatened to undermine the Crusade progress. Unlike legions known for dramatic campaigns or public displays of force, the Carcharodons' approach was subtle and deliberate. Their movements were calculated, their interventions measured, and their influence often invisible until the results were apparent. They were sentinels in the void, guardians who balanced restraint with action, ensuring that every step toward integration advanced without destabilizing existing societies. On planets fraught with internal tension, they appeared quietly, assessing the structure of governance, noting rivalries among leaders, and observing the behavior of populations before taking any action. Their objective was not conquest for glory, but the preservation of order and the careful implementation of the Emperor's vision. Observation was a foundation of their strategy. The Carcharodons watched long before they acted, noting patterns in disputes, the distribution of resources, and potential flashpoints that might erupt into violence. Only after this patient analysis would they intervene, applying force sparingly and precisely. Even when action was unavoidable, their engagement was guided by efficiency rather than spectacle, designed to restore balance without provoking unnecessary resistance. Through these measured efforts, worlds that might have descended into conflict were instead stabilized, aligned with the Imperium's framework, and prepared to contribute to the larger goals of humanity's expansion. The fleets of the Great Crusade carried soldiers, engineers, and administrators to new systems, yet even this extensive infrastructure could not account for every contingency. Distance, isolation, and the complexity of alien environments often delayed communication or response. Here, the autonomy of the Carcharodons was critical. They operated independently, making decisions in accordance with the Emperor's vision but guided by immediate circumstances. Their understanding of human nature, combined with disciplined training and experience, allowed them to preempt crises and resolve them with minimal disruption. In this way, they ensured that the Crusade's momentum remained steady and deliberate, even in sectors far from the central command. Conflict, though rare, became an inevitable aspect of this expansion. Some systems resisted imperial authority, whether due to local traditions, entrenched power structures, or misunderstanding. Others presented environmental or structural challenges that demanded decisive intervention. In these instances, the Carcharodons acted swiftly, employing strategies that prioritize effectiveness and preservation. Their strikes were precise, targeting only the sources of disorder while leaving the surrounding infrastructure intact. Their ability to contain conflict without escalating it preserved stability, strengthened local populations, and allowed the Crusade to continue its integration of countless systems without interruption. Even in the absence of overt conflict, the Carcharodons' presence influenced the behavior of leaders and populations alike. Governors understood that authority could be observed and corrected, while communities recognized the subtle reinforcement of order. The chapter's influence extended quietly across sectors, reinforcing the Emperor's authority and ensuring that the expansion of humanity did not falter in remote or isolated regions. Their work was unheralded but deeply effective, a bridge between the distant vision of the Emperor and the practical realities of governing vast swaths of space. The Emperor's guidance remained an unseen but constant presence, shaping the objectives and moral framework of the Crusade. The Carcharodons embodied this guidance through measured intervention, balancing patience and action, observation and influence. They maintained order not only by addressing immediate threats, but by anticipating potential instabilities, ensuring that entire systems remained aligned with the broader goals of the Imperium. Their quiet vigilance provided continuity and cohesion, essential qualities for sustaining the steady expansion of human civilization across the stars. In many ways, the Carcharodons acted as both stabilizers and catalysts. By intervening at critical junctures, they prevented minor disputes from escalating into widespread unrest. By observing quietly, they ensured that population could adapt to imperial oversight without unnecessary trauma. By acting decisively when required, they preserved the potential of entire systems. Their presence reflected a delicate balance between restraint and power, and through this balance, they upheld the Emperor's vision across regions that would otherwise have remained vulnerable to disorder. Even as distant fleets traversed the void, leaving trails of light across innumerable star systems, the Carcharodons remained vigilant, moving in silence among the shadows. Worlds were stabilized, leaders corrected, and conflicts resolved with precision, all without fanfare or recognition. In this way, the chapter maintained both the continuity and the cohesion of the Imperium, ensuring that the Crusade's expansion remained methodical, deliberate, and enduring. And so, in the quiet stretches between stars, where distant suns illuminated the vast emptiness of space, the Carcharodons continued their watch. They were guardians of stability, observers of human potential, and arbiters of subtle conflict, ensuring that the early expansion of the Imperium unfolded with measured care. In this calm, reflective silence, the galaxy seemed to pause, acknowledging the quiet vigilance of these silent sentinels and offering a subtle promise that the story of humanity's growth and of those who safeguarded it was far from complete. As the Great Crusade stretched ever deeper into the uncharted reaches of the galaxy, the Imperium faced challenges that tested not only its resources but its ability to maintain cohesion across vast distances. Some systems presented subtle dangers, long-isolated societies with deeply ingrained customs, political rivalries that could erupt into violence, and environments so harsh that survival itself was a struggle. Yet there were others, where the threat was immediate, deliberate, and more organized, civilizations or factions that resisted integration with a combination of strategy, cunning, and force. It was in these circumstances that the Carcharodons' role evolved from silent observers to decisive guardians, operating in the delicate balance between restraint and intervention. Unlike other legions, whose victories were often recorded in chronicles and celebrated across the Imperium, the Carcharodons' deeds were hidden, carried out with minimal disruption and maximum effect. They did not march with banners, nor did they seek acclaim. Instead, their presence was subtle, their influence measured, and their actions deliberate. Where unrest threatened the stability of a system, they intervened with precision, neutralizing sources of disorder before they could escalate. Their methods reflected the Emperor's vision, achieving lasting order with the minimum necessary disturbance, preserving the potential of the worlds they were entrusted to protect. Observation remained central to their operations. Every world, every settlement, and every leader was carefully studied before action was taken. They watched patterns of trade, governance, and social interaction, noting where tension could flare, where ambition might conflict with loyalty, and where misunderstandings had developed into outright rebellion. Only after thorough assessment did they act, and when they did, it was with swift, precise effectiveness. Their interventions were never arbitrary. They were calculated, deliberate, and aligned with the larger strategic goals of the Crusade. The fleets of the Great Crusade, though formidable, could not maintain constant oversight of every system. Distance and the vast scale of space meant that even the most well-coordinated command could not anticipate every nuance of human and environmental complexity. In these regions, the independence of the Carcharodons was essential. They could assess threats, execute solutions, and guide civilizations without immediate direction from central command, ensuring that integration proceeded uninterrupted, and that the Emperor's vision was realized across distant, isolated systems. The transition from observation to action required both discernment and courage. On some worlds, minimal interference was sufficient to align populations and leaders with imperial authority. On others, resistance was more entrenched, requiring precise, decisive measures to prevent unrest from destabilizing entire systems. The Carcharodons' ability to choose the appropriate level of intervention was vital. They understood that excessive force could provoke chaos, while hesitation could allow instability to fester. Their discipline and experience allowed them to navigate this balance, maintaining order while preserving human potential. Even as the Crusade brought countless systems under the Imperium's sway, pockets of opposition continued to emerge. Some factions sought to exploit the isolation of distant worlds, attempting to resist integration through subversion or strategic cunning. Others tested the limits of imperial patience, challenging authority with both guile and force. In these cases, the Carcharodons' unique capabilities proved indispensable. They combined observation, strategy, and decisive action to neutralize threats, often before the wider fleet could arrive. Their presence reassured compliant worlds and deterred would-be challengers, ensuring that the Crusade's expansion continued without disruption. The Emperor's distant authority remained a guiding principle, yet practical implementation depended upon the vigilance of those who could operate independently and effectively. The Carcharodons embodied this principle, acting as guardians of the Imperium coherence across vast distances. Their interventions preserved the stability necessary for integration, while their measured approach ensured that human societies were guided rather than dominated. In this way, they maintained continuity, extended oversight into regions beyond immediate reach, and reinforced the strategic vision of the Crusade. Across the galaxy, their influence quietly strengthened the Imperium. Leaders learned caution and prudence through subtle correction. Populations adapted to new governance with minimal disruption, and potential crises were diffused before escalating. The Carcharodons' effectiveness lay not in recognition or spectacle, but in results. Stable worlds, aligned systems, and a growing human domain resilient enough to withstand both internal and external pressures. In this period, their vigilance became increasingly critical as the Crusade encountered more organized threats. Systems previously overlooked, judged minor or inconsequential, often revealed hidden complexities that required subtle but decisive action. The Carcharodons' ability to assess, intervene, and restore order without excessive disruption allowed the Imperium to expand steadily, safely, and with precision. They were both custodians and arbiters, moving silently across worlds and sectors, ensuring that the growth of humanity remained deliberate, disciplined, and enduring. And so, as the fleets continued their measured passage through the void, leaving trails of light across innumerable systems, the Carcharodons persisted in their shadowed watch. Silent, vigilant, and unyielding, they shaped the course of human expansion with quiet authority, bridging the distance between vision and implementation, observation and action. In the calm expanse of space, where distant stars shimmered across the darkness, the galaxy seemed to acknowledge their presence, offering a subtle promise that the story of silent guardianship and disciplined expansion was far from complete. As the Great Crusade pushed further into the uncharted sectors of the galaxy, the Imperium encountered resistance of a scale and coordination it had rarely faced before. Some worlds, previously regarded as minor or isolated, revealed factions capable of organized opposition, guided by ambition, survival instinct, or long-standing cultural principles. The Carcharodons, already accustomed to operating at the margins, now found themselves facing these larger, more deliberate threats. Their role shifted subtly from silent guardians to active strategists, balancing observation with decisive intervention, ensuring that the Emperor's vision remained unbroken even in the face of emergent resistance. The chapter's approach was deliberate and precise. Unlike other legions whose campaigns were marked by grandeur, spectacle, or open confrontation, the Carcharodons operated with efficiency and discretion. They assessed the enemy carefully, studying patterns of behavior, leadership, and logistics, understanding that victory was as much about timing and strategy as it was about force. Their engagement was never immediate. It was calculated, measured, and designed to achieve maximum effect with minimal disruption. They understood that in a galaxy as vast as this, the careful application of strength often outweighed the reckless display of power. Observation remained their first priority. Systems under potential threat were carefully monitored. Every movement of opposing forces, every fluctuation in local power, and every social or political shift was noted and analyzed. Leaders who might have misjudged their authority, communities at risk of internal conflict, and planets vulnerable to environmental or structural pressures were all assessed with equal attention. The Carcharodons waited patiently, gathering intelligence, understanding the subtleties of each situation, and planning intervention in a manner that would preserve the long-term stability of the Imperium. When action became necessary, it was swift, precise, and purposeful. The chapter struck only where it was required, focusing on the points that could most effectively neutralize resistance and restore order. Their operations were surgical, designed to minimize collateral disruption while ensuring that the systems in question could continue to function as part of the Imperium. Populations were guided into compliance not through intimidation alone, but through the demonstration of disciplined authority and the subtle reinforcement of structure and order. In this way, entire sectors were stabilized without the need for prolonged campaigns or destructive engagements. The Great Crusades fleets provided support, yet their scale and organizational rigidity often made them ill-suited for rapid response to emergent threats. Here, the autonomy of the Carcharodons was critical. They operated independently, interpreting circumstances with discretion and executing solutions without waiting for central direction. Their ability to act decisively in remote systems allowed the Imperium to maintain coherence across vast distances, bridging the gaps between the Emperor's distant authority and the practical realities of enforcing unity among diverse and often unpredictable populations. The chapter's effectiveness was not limited to military precision. Their subtle influence extended into governance and social order. Leaders who might have acted against imperial interests were corrected with minimal disruption. Populations at risk of unrest were guided toward cohesion, and potential crises were mitigated before escalating. Their interventions ensured that the foundations of human integration remained stable, even as the crusade expanded into increasingly distant and complex regions. The balance they maintained between restraint and action reflected a disciplined understanding of both human nature and strategic necessity. Even when faced with resistance, the Carcharodons adhered to principles of efficiency and preservation. They recognized that unnecessary force could provoke disorder or resentment, undermining the Emperor's vision in the long term. Their campaigns were marked by precise application of strength, careful coordination, and a focus on achieving stability rather than acclaim. This approach allowed them to neutralize threats while maintaining the cohesion and resilience of newly integrated systems. In the vast expanse of space, the chapter's operations extended across multiple sectors, often simultaneously. Worlds under their guidance were strengthened, conflict contained, and integration reinforced. The Carcharodons acted as both guardians and arbiters, ensuring that the Imperium's expansion remained methodical, deliberate, and enduring. Their presence, though largely hidden, became an unspoken assurance that the galaxy's growth could continue without collapse or disorder. As the Great Crusade advanced, and the stars stretched endlessly across the void, the Carcharodons maintained their vigilance. They observed, they guided, and they acted when necessary, embodying the principles of patience, discipline, and strategic foresight. In the quiet expanse between systems, where distant suns glimmered like watchful eyes, their presence ensured that the Emperor's vision was realized with both precision and care. And so, in the stillness of space, where fleets glided silently across the darkness, the chapter continued its watch. They were guardians in the shadows, arbiters of subtle conflict, and sentinels of human expansion. Through their calm, deliberate, and unyielding efforts, the Imperium's early campaigns were safeguarded, laying the foundation for a galaxy united under the distant authority of the Emperor. In that silence, the story of the Carcharodons persisted, a quiet promise that their vigilance, discipline, and guardianship were far from complete. As the Great Crusade extended deeper into the distant and uncharted regions of the galaxy, the Imperium faced challenges of increasing complexity. Some worlds were rich in resources but difficult to govern, while others were isolated, their populations shaped by generations of seclusion, often resistant to external authority. The Emperor's distant guidance provided a unifying vision, but it was a disciplined vigilance of chapters such as the Carcharodons that ensured the practical implementation of order across these remote systems. In these frontier regions, the Carcharodons became both observers and active strategists, anticipating threats and intervening with precision before discord could undermine the Crusade's progress. The chapter's approach was deliberate, shaped by centuries of accumulated wisdom and strict adherence to discipline. They did not seek recognition, nor did they engage in displays of power or ceremony. Instead, their operations were defined by patience, careful observation, and measured action. Every world they entered, every conflict they assessed, was studied in detail. Patterns of governance, social interaction, and leadership were scrutinized, allowing the Carcharodons to anticipate potential flashpoints and neutralize threats before they could escalate. Their interventions were surgical, designed to stabilize and guide rather than dominate or disrupt. Observation remained the foundation of all their operations. The Carcharodons watched silently, noting the distribution of resources, the alignment of political factions, and the behaviors of key figures within each society. Even minor disputes were assessed, for small tension could ripple outward, threatening the stability of entire systems. By understanding these dynamics, the chapter could intervene precisely, applying authority where necessary and allowing restraint where possible. Their work ensured that the Imperium's expansion remained deliberate and stable, even across the vast distances that separated Central Command from these fringe worlds. Autonomy was a critical element of their success. While the fleets of the Great Crusade carried soldiers, engineers, and administrators to distant systems, communication delays and logistical constraints often made immediate oversight impossible. The Carcharodons operated independently, guided by principles and intelligence rather than orders alone. This independence allowed them to react swiftly to emerging crises, neutralizing threats and stabilizing populations in a manner that reinforced the Emperor's vision without requiring direct supervision. Their judgment, tempered by experience and observation, was essential to the continued coherence of the Imperium's expansion. The transition from observation to action required discernment. On some worlds, subtle guidance was sufficient, aligning leaders and populations with imperial objectives without disruption. On others, entrenched resistance or emergent conflict demanded decisive intervention. In such cases, the Carcharodons acted with precision, striking at the sources of instability while preserving the larger structure of society. Their interventions were never excessive, their force always measured, and their primary goal remained the preservation of order and long-term stability. Even as they engaged in these operations, the Carcharodons' influence extended beyond immediate crises. Leaders who had previously misjudged their authority were corrected with subtle guidance. Populations at risk of unrest were brought into alignment, and potential rebellions were diffused before they could escalate. In this way, their presence strengthened not only individual worlds but entire sectors, reinforcing cohesion necessary for sustained imperial growth. Their actions, though largely unrecorded in official histories, shaped the development of human civilization across the galaxy. The Great Crusade's steady expansion relied on both large-scale coordination and precise local intervention. The Carcharodons occupied a space between these two principles, acting as custodians of stability while ensuring that the Emperor's vision was implemented practically across systems that would otherwise be vulnerable to disorder. They moved quietly, guided by intelligence and intuition, ensuring that no conflict, no misunderstanding, and no local disruption could threaten the broader objectives of the Crusade. As the Imperium encountered more organized resistance, the Carcharodons' role evolved further. They became hunters of the fringe, identifying and neutralizing emergent threats before they could coalesce into larger challenges. Their presence in these remote sectors reassured compliant worlds, deterred would-be adversaries, and provided a stabilizing influence that extended the Emperor's reach into regions beyond the immediate control of fleets and administrators. Through careful observation, measured intervention, and disciplined execution, the chapter ensured that the Imperium's expansion continued steadily and without compromise. Even in the vast emptiness of space, where distant suns glimmered across countless systems, the Carcharodons maintained their vigilance. They were silent guardians, moving through shadows between stars, their influence extending quietly but effectively across the galaxy. Worlds were guided, conflicts contained, and populations aligned to the principles of the Crusade, all without fanfare or public recognition. Their discipline, patience, and unwavering purpose ensured that the foundations of the Imperium remained secure even in its most distant reaches. And so, as fleets traced luminous paths across the void and humanity expanded into new systems, the Carcharodons persisted in their quiet watch. They were both arbiters and custodians, guardians whose unseen actions ensured the steady, deliberate, and enduring progress of the Great Crusade. In the stillness between stars, where distant light reflected across empty worlds, their story unfolded in measured steps, a testament to vigilance, patience, and the unyielding commitment to safeguarding the Imperium's destiny. As the Great Crusade reached the outermost sectors of human expansion, the Imperium faced increasingly organized resistance. Some systems had grown wary of external authority over generations, developing factions capable of coordinated defiance. Others had remnants of forgotten conflicts, where the scars of prior wars shaped their defense strategies and hardened their resolve. It was in these circumstances that the Carcharodons' methods proved essential. Their role evolved once more, from silent observers and subtle guides into tacticians capable of orchestrating precise interventions across multiple worlds, ensuring the continuity of the Emperor's vision even when faced with widespread opposition. Their approach remained deliberate, informed by centuries of experience and strict adherence to discipline. Unlike other legions, whose campaigns were often marked by ostentation or overt displays of force, the Carcharodons acted with quiet precision. They surveyed the battlefield before it existed, understanding not only the capabilities of their adversaries but the social, political, and environmental dynamics of every world under consideration. Observation preceded action, insight guided intervention. The chapter understood that victory without foresight could destabilize more than it secured, and that measured strategy was as crucial as martial strength. Autonomy was key to their effectiveness. The fleets of the Crusade, while immense, could not monitor every star system simultaneously. Communication across light years was slow, and logistical coordination was often insufficient for rapid response. The Carcharodons operated independently, interpreting circumstances, assessing threats, and acting with decisiveness, all while remaining aligned with the Emperor's distant authority. Their judgment combined empirical observation with an intuitive understanding of human behavior, allowing them to neutralize emerging threats before they could escalate into full-scale rebellion or chaos. When engagement became necessary, the Carcharodons employed precision rather than overwhelming force. They identified critical nodes of opposition, targeting leaders, fortifications, or strategic positions to disrupt cohesion and prevent wider conflict. Their actions were calculated to minimize collateral damage, preserving the structure of society and the potential of the population. Even in the heat of engagement, they acted with measured efficiency, ensuring that the Emperor's vision of unity and stability remained intact. Their vigilance extended beyond individual conflicts. Across multiple systems, they coordinated interventions to prevent resistance from consolidating into organized campaigns against the Crusade. Worlds that might have been isolated islands of defiance were subdued and guided into alignment through a combination of strategic pressure, subtle influence, and, when necessary, decisive force. Leaders learned restraint. Populations adapted to imperial oversight, and emergent threats were diffused before they could disrupt the wider objectives of the Crusade. The Carcharodons' presence acted as both deterrent and corrective measure, maintaining the delicate balance between growth and stability. Observation remained continuous, even during engagements. The chapter monitored the effects of each intervention, noting changes in political, social, and economic patterns. They adapted their strategies according to the evolving circumstances of each system, ensuring that the long-term stability of the Imperium was never compromised. Their method reflected profound understanding that control was not achieved solely through conquest, but through the preservation of coherence, the alignment of populations, and the careful management of human potential. The Great Crusade relied on both expansive coordination and localized precision. The Carcharodons' operations bridged these principles, acting as both guardians and tacticians. Where fleets enforced compliance, the chapter ensured understanding. Where administrators implemented policy, the Carcharodons reinforced stability. Their silent influence extended across sectors, guiding human expansion while containing threats, shaping the Imperium's growth without drawing attention to themselves. Their work was largely unrecorded, yet its consequences endured, creating cohesion across vast distances that would otherwise have been vulnerable to disorder. Even as they engaged in coordinated campaigns, the Carcharodons maintained their hallmark restraint. Unnecessary force was avoided, and the goal of each engagement remained the restoration of order rather than the pursuit of glory. Their effectiveness lay in precision, patience, and the subtle application of strength. Systems that might have descended into chaos were instead stabilized, their leaders guided toward prudent action, and populations preserved for the continuation of the Imperium's expansion. In the silence between stars, the chapter's presence shaped the galaxy's future. Their interventions ensured that the Crusade could proceed with confidence, that the foundations of newly integrated systems were secure, and that the Emperor's vision remained coherent across vast distances. They were both custodians and arbiters, silent yet decisive, guiding humanity through the early turbulence of interstellar expansion, and so, as the fleets traced luminous paths across the void and humanity pressed into ever more distant regions, the Carcharodons persisted in their quiet vigilance. Their story unfolded in the shadows between stars, a testament to discipline, foresight, and unwavering loyalty to the Emperor's purpose. In the calm expanse of space, where distant suns glimmered across countless systems, their influence ensured that the narrative of silent guardianship and deliberate expansion continued, a promise that the tale of vigilance, strategy, and humanity's growth was far from complete. As the Great Crusade reached a stage of both triumph and subtle complexity, the Imperium's reach extended into countless star systems, each presenting unique challenges of governance, culture, and environment. Some worlds had been newly integrated, still fragile under imperial guidance, while others were seasoned in self-governance, requiring subtle influence to maintain alignment with the broader objectives of the Emperor. It was in this era of expansion and consolidation that the Carcharodons' vigilance became ever more essential. Their presence, largely unseen, ensured that humanity's growth remained steady, disciplined, and resilient. The chapter's operations were characterized by patience and meticulous planning. Unlike other legions whose accomplishments were recorded in public chronicles, the Carcharodons' influence was measured in quiet results. Stability maintained across multiple systems, conflict contained before escalation, and populations guided toward cohesion without unnecessary disruption. They operated as both observers and arbiters, bridging the distance between the Emperor's distant vision and the practical realities of integrating diverse civilizations. Every mission was executed with precision, balancing restraint with decisive action. Observation remained their primary instrument. Every system under their purview was carefully studied, from the behavior of its leaders to the distribution of resources, from social tension to potential sources of unrest. Even minor irregularities were assessed, for small issues could have consequences that rippled outward. By understanding these dynamics, the Carcharodons could intervene with maximum efficiency, applying corrective measures only where necessary. Their focus was always long-term stability, the preservation of social cohesion, the alignment of populations with imperial principles, and the safeguarding of human potential across the stars. Autonomy was essential to their effectiveness. The fleets of the Great Crusade, vast and meticulously organized, could not monitor every sector continuously. Distances measured in light years limited real-time oversight, and even the most disciplined administrators could not address every emergent threat. The Carcharodons operated independently, interpreting circumstances, assessing risks, and acting decisively to maintain stability. Their judgment combined rigorous observation with intuitive understanding of human behavior, allowing them to resolve complex situations before they escalated. When action became necessary, it was executed with precision and discipline. The chapter targeted sources of unrest or resistance with efficiency, neutralizing threats while preserving the broadest social structure. Conflict was always contained, force applied only where essential, and outcomes carefully managed to prevent unintended consequences. In this way, worlds that might have spiraled into chaos were instead brought into alignment with the Emperor's vision, their populations guided gently yet firmly toward cohesion. Even in the absence of overt conflict, the Carcharodons influenced the development of civilizations across multiple systems. Leaders who might have overstepped their authority were subtly corrected, populations at risk of division were stabilized, and potential crises were diffused before they could threaten the Imperium's coherence. Their intervention strengthened not only individual worlds but entire sectors, reinforcing the stability necessary for sustainable expansion. The chapter's effectiveness was evident in the seamless integration of distant systems, a testament to patience, foresight, and disciplined execution. As threats grew more complex, whether from internal resistance, environmental hazards, or isolated factions testing imperial authority, the Carcharodons' vigilance remained constant. They coordinated interventions across multiple systems when required, ensuring that no single issue could compromise larger objectives. Their ability to operate at both micro and macro scales allowed the Crusade to expand confidently, even into regions previously deemed uncertain or hostile. In every engagement, they maintained a delicate balance between restraint and decisive action, reflecting the principles of strategy, observation, and long-term planning that defined their chapter. The Emperor's distant authority guided the Crusade, but it was a quiet work of the Carcharodons that ensured the practical application of that vision. Their operations safeguarded the foundations of the Imperium, ensuring that the expansion of humanity did not falter and that newly integrated systems could thrive under careful stewardship. Their discipline, patience, and understanding of human nature made them not only guardians of worlds but custodians of the Crusade itself, maintaining the continuity and coherence upon which its long-term success depended. Even as the fleets glided silently through the void, leaving paths of light across countless systems, the Carcharodons moved in shadows between stars, vigilant and unwavering. Worlds were guided, populations stabilized, and conflicts contained with precision. Their influence, though largely hidden, ensured that the Imperium's expansion remained steady and deliberate, reflecting a vision of humanity united and resilient. And so, as the Great Crusade reached its zenith, the chapter's silent watch continued. They were guardians in the shadows, arbiters of stability, and sentinels of human potential. Their story, largely unseen, unfolded with patience, discipline, and unwavering commitment to the Emperor's purpose. In the calm expanse of space, where distant suns glimmered across innumerable systems, their vigilance ensured that the Imperium's early growth endured, secure and deliberate. The galaxy seemed to acknowledge their presence, a quiet testament that the tale of these silent guardians and their careful stewardship was far from complete.